Hi, everybody, and welcome to the Modern Data Culture Summit hosted by Catapult Systems. Today, this session, as it says on the screen here, we'll be talking about how to build Power BI governance at scale. And more specifically, we'll be looking at ways that you can apply good governance practices to reduce proliferation of dashboards and other content within your tenant. So let's kick it off. First, quick intros. My name is Seth Warner. I'm one of the technical leads and managing consultants here at Catapult in the data and AI practice here in Austin, Texas. And I also have with me Eric Scove. You're on mute, Eric.
Thank you, Seth. Morning, everybody. Eric here. Similar to Seth, I'm on the data and AI team as a managing consultant, and I'm based out of our Denver office.
Okay, so just a few items. This session today will be recorded, and for anyone that's joining, you will receive a link to it and a follow-up email. And for any questions that you may have, I encourage you to jot them down. There will be time at the end of the session where we could do an open Q&A. Okay, so just a quick agenda of what we'll be covering. So we'll touch briefly on data culture, given that this is a modern data culture summit, just to provide a little bit of context for the content of what we'll be talking about. And for those on the call that may be unfamiliar with Power BI, or if you have differing levels of experience with it, we're going to spend a little bit of time just doing an overview of the platform itself and the different components, so that way you have a better understanding of the practices that we'll be talking about. And then we'll be jumping into really specific reasons that content in your Power BI tenant can proliferate, and more specifically, what you can do about it.
So what is a data culture? So organizationally, this is a really important concept to have around how you as an organization use and interpret data to drive your daily business decisions. And we kind of paraphrase that here at Catapult by basically saying, a data-driven culture is one that really fosters that type of an environment where your decision-making process embraces a consistent approach that requires some sort of proof to it, right? So that's a normalized set of data, one central version of the truth, and it drives the business decisions that you make as an organization.
Well said. And there's really no better way to manage and promote your data culture than with a platform like Power BI. So the Power BI platform is very broad and extensive, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. But at a very high level, we're just going to cover essentially two main components. One is there's Power BI Desktop, which many of you may be familiar with. This is just a free application that you can download onto your machine. And the primary purpose of this is really just to create and produce content. That's it. The secondary component is the Power BI service. And the purpose of this is really for sharing and collaboration. So once you produce and create your content locally, you publish it into the Power BI service and then share it with other people in your organization or with clients who may be external. So very high level, those are the main constituent parts of the Power BI platform. Okay, now Microsoft did make some changes very recently to the licensing structure, which I will address, but I'm going to cover how it's been historically for a long time, because there are some different nuances to the platform. So essentially, licenses are for users and capacities are for content. And what this essentially means is that if you're a user with a pro license, you can publish your content into a group workspace in a shared capacity, which is free, and then that content can be consumed really only by other users with a pro license. Now, if you do have Power BI Premium, also known as a dedicated capacity, then a pro user can also publish into that capacity, and then that content can be consumed by both free and pro users. So the differing options between the free and pro licenses and then the shared or premium capacities, as you can see, does have an effect on how content can be consumed. The key takeaways here are that Power BI Pro licenses make it possible to share with other people, but Premium makes it feasible, especially for large groups and really large scale distribution. The thing that Microsoft changed is they just introduced something called Power BI Premium per user. And essentially the way that works is very much like this premium dedicated capacity that you see here. So the idea there is that you get all of the premium features, but just on a user level. So the functionality is, for large scale distribution is largely the same. So at a high level, that's essentially the different options between capacities and licenses. Okay, let's get into some more of the specifics now that we've laid that foundation. As Eric and I were preparing this content for examining what are some of the ways that content can proliferate in your tenant and what can you do about it, we came up with this twofold mandate. So number one, you should be able to control and organize essentially what you already have within your tenant, all of the reports and dashboards. And then number two, you should be able to have mechanisms in place so you can put guardrails in to prevent future proliferation, and so you can have good long-term scalability. We came up with these 4 reasons.
Yeah, and one of the first big reasons there is really just the lack of visibility. So the idea that the content exists, or you know the content exists, but you just simply can't find it. And that's, whether it's because you've got too many workspaces, or things aren't named correctly, or you just have never been exposed to the appropriate app, or again, workspace or shared content, knowing what that exists. So being able to find that within your tenant can cause major challenges for an individual.
Yes. Now the other two, I'll skip to show the next two, is related to access. So the first one is, as Eric mentioned, you can have content that's out there, but people just can't find it. Or if content is out there and users may not even have access to it, that is a problem. So in this scenario, content can proliferate because users don't see the content is out there, so they just go and create their own, which leads to number 3. So that can really only happen if you have people in your organization that have essentially too much privilege, permissions where they can create and publish and create content when they really shouldn't be. That's a problem, and we'll touch on some things that you can do to rein that in.
Yeah, that's a great one on number 3. Just the simple example of disabling the ability to have people create workspaces ad hoc, right? And we'll touch on that here in a minute. Number 4 there is just a lack of trust. So again, very similar to not being able to find it or not knowing which access one you're supposed to have. If you have 4 different data sets called sales, which of those data sets is the sales data set that you're supposed to use? So not being able to trust and know which single point of truth, that data set that represents the data you're after, that has the governed calculations, that has the correct nomenclature for your business. I mean, that's a really big problem, and that can cause you to go and create your own because you don't trust what's already there.
So what we've done with these four reasons is we have one slide to touch on each of them, but rather than just to continue to talk through scenarios that you may encounter, what we're going to do is we're going to switch over to some different tenants and show you specifically what you can do and what it looks like. So first, we're going to tackle how to manage lack of visibility. So let me switch over to this, pull this on the screen. Okay, so number 1, the search features again. So this scenario is if there's content out there that exists, but people just can't find it, presumably because you just have lots and lots and lots of content. Fortunately, there's a lot of native features within the Power BI service that make this easy. Most notably is the search box up top. So for instance, I can search for the word actuarial and see all of this content within my tenant here.
And it's important to note that this is content that you as a user have access to. So this isn't necessarily something, problems number 2 and 3. This is problem number 1. How do I find the content that I'm after that I already have access to?
Yes, and so this is really showing not only the content you have access to, but just every type of content. So all reports, all dashboards, all workspaces. If you want to get a little bit more targeted, you'll notice I can go over here to data sets And then there's a search here. So I can search for the same thing and just search for all data sets that I own, or anything that I may have used recently. Also, within workspaces, this works the same way. So for instance, if you're not really looking for a specific report or a specific dashboard and you just want to know a more specific place to look where content may be stored, you can search just for workspaces. And then lastly, we'll touch on apps here. So with apps, I can go to the left-hand navigation, click on apps, and then go here. And so what we're looking at here is a collection of just pure organizational apps that you can search for.
Yeah, and apps really represent kind of that pinnacle level of governance within your organization. These are the data sets that are curated, they're well defined, they've got good business rules, definitions around them, you've got documentation to support them, and this is the content that you are actively pushing to your organization. So this is the #1 recommended way for organizations to really curate and govern and push content to their user base is through the use of an app.
Exactly. So all of these are methods that your users have at their disposal to search on their own terms content that they want to find within your tenant. Now, another option is to do featured content. So let me pull that up. So for instance, if you want to make it really, really easy for users to find content and really not have to search for it at all, there's a feature in here called featured content.
Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, when you come into your homepage as a user, your first thing that you're going to see is the content that you've used the most, right? That's at the top, but then right beneath that is featured content. So anything that you as a government body, or if you're the responsible individual for doing, governance review for your organization, if you want to highlight content to be immediately pushed to the top of that list, you feature that inside of the Power BI portal. And you can feature dashboards, you can feature apps, and you can feature reports.
Yeah, so let me show you how that works. If I go to one particular workspace, what I'll do is click this ellipsis here, click on settings, and you'll notice right here there's an option that says feature on home. Display this report in the featured section of Power BI. So this is a report that you can feature. You can also feature an app. In this case, the app is already featured, so that's why it tells me here, stop featuring this app. Or you can feature a dashboard. So if I go over to the sales workspace, go to the dashboard again, going into the settings, you'll see here featured, promote this dashboard in the featured section of home. So whether it's an app, a report, or a dashboard, these are all things that you can select to have featured on the home page.
And it's important to note with features, that's one area that the overall governance strategy is a little loose. If you are considered to be a contributor for a particular workspace or particular content, that's all the access rights you need in order to feature something. And so that's a little loose because you'll have a lot of individuals within your organization that will have that contributor or content creator ability. And so that's where, as a governing process or a governing body, you're going to want to periodically review your featured content and make sure it's appropriate. And if you find content that really doesn't pass the litmus test of whether it's an organization feature set or not, you might want to, speak with the content curator or the workspace administrator and de-feature that from that list.
Yes, and so that's a great segue into our next topic in terms of access, whether it's too much or not enough. So there's the workspace permissions that Eric was just touching on, as well as licensing and governance. So let's look at some examples here. So licensing, let's pull this over. As I mentioned in the beginning, for licenses, a user can either be free or pro. There are a few different ways that you can retrieve this content, but one of the most effective and easiest ways is just to go into your Microsoft 365 Admin Center. You have to be an admin to get in here. Under the billing section, you can go to licenses and see all of the licenses available, including Power BI Free and Pro. If I were to click on this, there are named accounts in here, so I won't do that, but you could click it and it'll give you a complete list of all of the individuals in your organization with those licenses. You can export and use that as you see fit. Now, another consideration is how users may acquire the licenses or signing up for it.
Yeah, so if you're in the government cloud, your users cannot self-sign up. Users in the government cloud have to have Power BI free provisioned within the O365 billing profile for them. So they have to be assigned that free license. Even though it's still free, you still have to go turn it on for that particular user. However, in the public cloud, anybody can go into the Power BI service and simply say, hey, I want to use this for free. So if there's a couple reasons why you may not want that for your organization, and that really boils down to if you know you have content that you want to make sure doesn't get shared or proliferated, hard word there, then you can come in and using PowerShell, you can disable that self-service sign up to where people then need to request from the governing body, also probably IT, to be assigned that free or pro license for Power BI.
Exactly. Yeah. So those are great tools that you can use to essentially default to the lowest level of permissions or whatever you see fit. That if you want people to default to not have access or to just get the trial version, those are options that you can have that you can control through this service. Another option that you have is if you're a Power BI admin, you can go to the admin portal. Here we're looking at the tenant settings, and there's a lot of different settings in here that'll give you really just total control over your tenant. A few I want to call out specifically, this one. So allowing users to try Power BI paid features. You may have seen this in your Power BI tenant, but essentially what this means is if a user has a free license, they can sign up for Pro for free for 60 days.
Yeah, and as soon as the user tries to take advantage of any feature that requires a pro license and they don't have it, they're going to be prompted. It's like,
Right.
hey, you're trying to share content or you're trying to access a workspace that requires the pro license. Do you want to sign up for this free trial?
Yeah. And what we've seen in a lot of our engagements is that if you have that enabled and you give users the pro license capabilities for free, that when the trial ends, then they want to request the license. So it can be a slippery slope. That's why, as Eric mentioned in the beginning, you may want to consider just disabling that from the start.
Yeah, and when that trial period ends, they are not automatically granted that pro license. When that trial period ends, they lose access to the content
Right.
that requires it.
Yes. So there's a lot of different options that you can configure here for either licenses that exist or having people sign up for licenses or upgrading their type of licenses. But another really important consideration is not just licenses for users, but also workspaces for your content. So staying here in the admin portal, there are a few other settings about workspaces that you can enable or disable both workspace creation and classic workspace creation.
Yeah, and this is really probably, if not the number one, the number two takeaway from this particular set is you really want to turn these off, right? You don't want your users to just be able to come in and create workspaces in whatever shape or fashion they want. This needs to be governed, right? At Catapult, we use a Power App to request any sort of governance capability for creating a Teams workspace, etc. And it's really simple. This is a lightweight app that we've created. It sends an email off to be reviewed. That review happens usually in like 5 or 10 minutes. And that's also important. That review process needs to be really quick because if it takes too long, your users are going to go do it some other way, right? So if you want them to be using Power BI and you want them to use workspaces, then you need to have a very high level, very lightly governed view process to make sure things like naming conventions, wording, making sure that it's not repeating a workspace that already exists. And then they submit that. The governing body, IT creates that for them. And then boom, they can come in and start accessing that workspace that's been created for them.
Exactly. And you'll see that within our own tenant, originally before we had this governing app, there was just wild variation in terms of the naming standards for workspaces. And so now you can see for all clients that we have in workspaces, it's prefixed, it's consistent, it follows a very standard naming convention. So this is a great way to manage the workspaces that you already have and then how to manage future workspaces that can be created.
Yeah, and
Now,
workspaces are a really important part about how that governance process works. And you really, it's the recommended approach from Microsoft is to create those workspaces based on kind of their target audience and what they're for. So whether that's department, whether that's team, whether that's key organizational initiative, workspaces are then associated with apps. And again, apps are that primary method of highly governed content going out to the masses. So having a very tight control and a process to govern the creation and usage of workspaces is really, really important when it comes to governance.
Yeah, and I think the other thing I would add there is that it really doesn't matter which process you pick, but I think consistency is key here. So in our case, we often have workspaces just for individual clients. All of that work is compartmentalized into the different workspaces. But if I've seen other organizations where they may have it grouped by internal departments or different product lines. So there's a number of different ways that you can do it. There's no rules really, but as long as you just have something that's consistent, a consistent methodology, that's one of the keys.
Yeah, governed, followed process, very important.
Now, if we look at just one workspace in particular, I can go into, say, access here. I've got Eric and myself in here. If I wanted to add a new member, you'll see that there's 4 different levels of permissions: admin, member, contributor, and viewer. Well, what does this mean exactly? As you can imagine, admin has control over the entire workspace. And then here in the Microsoft documentation, you'll see that there are, let me go back here. There's a number of different features that are available for those different levels. Essentially, the takeaway is that, of course, admin can do everything. Viewer can really only view reports. They can't share, they can't edit, they can't modify, they can't do anything. And then member and contributor are somewhere in between. So what we
it's
have
important
here,
within Power BI, there's a couple things that you want to have there when it comes to determining access for that. A good rule of thumb, and again, a recommended practice, is at the workspace level, you want to have at least 2 accounts that are associated with an admin. And one of those probably should be a service account. And again, that just guarantees that as users come and go, you have access and control of that particular content. Now, when it comes into how you want to share content, this decision tree comes from the Microsoft governance document, which is a fantastic document. If you haven't read that, you should go and read it. It's quite lengthy. It's like 260 odd pages, but there's a lot of really, really good content in there, and it's pretty up to date. There's a few things that are coming in with recent releases with Ignite, et cetera, that have changed that a little bit, but overall, very solid document and should be an integral part of any governance plan that you create. But at the high level, the very first thing you ask is what type of permissions is this particular person need? And most of that is going to come in as read-only. And if that's read-only, that means they're going to do it in an app, right? So an app is, again, the highest granular content that you have. The best way to govern content to the masses is to put it in an app, have that app in a workspace, and then grant users access to that app.
right? So if you want people to have maybe a little bit more control beyond just consuming the content through an app, and you want them to have access into a workspace, then you can see if the content is a little bit more collaborative and you don't necessarily want people to change it, but just to maybe have their own copies or share, then you get more into the workspace permission. So you can see for all of the content within a workspace, it's a little less formal method. It's basically like inviting users into a group folder, essentially, where they have free range to consume all of the content within there.
Yeah, and then the very last thing really is that sharing option, and the sharing option, you can share pretty much anything within Power BI. You can share a data set, you can share a report, you can share a dashboard, but really the key there is that sharing is between the person who is sharing and the person who's receiving. So if either of those break, that access is lost. So it's it's lightweight and it's very easy, but it should also be one of the least used options in terms of collaboration. This is, hey, I need you to take a look at this, look at it, and then if you really need repeated access to that, it probably should be in a workspace or an app that you have access to.
Yep, exactly. Okay, so now let's get on to really reason number 4 for why content can proliferate, and that is lack of trust. We've outlined a few different things here, and so once again, let me switch over to, let's go here. We'll talk about first data set endorsement. So let me pull up this tenant. And if I go to the data set search, what you may notice here is, we talked about this previously, looking at recommended data sets, all data sets. There's a column over here that says endorsement, and there's 2 options. We have certified and promoted.
Yeah, and Really, that's the key thing there. And the difference between certified and promoted is certified really needs to have a process and governance wrapped around it. That's the certified is the highest level of organizational stamp that this is the asset. This is what you want to use for this particular content area. Promoted is simply any content that the contributor or the member that's published that data set has said, this is something that I think is useful. And it's really kind of more past the department or team type of governance process. It's not necessarily ready for organizational usage. So any member or contributor that publishes a data set can tag that data set as promoted. And by default, any person that has those same rights can tag a data set as certified. However, certified has a little bit of a wrapper around it that allows you to govern that process. So as Seth's showing here, you can see for a data set, and the person who has the contributor or the member access can tag it for promoted or certified. But there's that little, how do I get my report certified piece? And that's really where you can go in as an administrator and set up a portal that you can define what that certification process is. You can define who can certify that. And really, again, highest level of content, similar to apps, only a very small number of people in the organization should be able to certify data sets for approval.
Yeah. So what we're showing here is how specifically to either certify or promote through this endorsement feature. I'm showing that for a report. You can also do it for a data set. So again, within the workspace, you can just go to the settings. And in this case, I can say, here's the endorsement. Now, one important point here, as Eric mentioned, is that you can go through the governance process and control who can promote, who can certify, but you should be careful because we have seen instances where you go into a tenant and you see more than half of the content is certified.
Everything's certified. Woohoo!
Everything's certified. So it's like sending, like, every email that you send is urgent. If you do that, eventually people will stop paying attention. So one thing that's important is that you should be selective in what constitutes a certified data set. And
Yeah.
one
You
thing
can
that's
control that
important,
again at the certified level. You can control
yeah,
who is authorized within your organization, and that should be the default. The default you should set to only, a small group of governance security members can certify content.
yeah, exactly. And so not only is it important to understand what is the ratio of certified versus non-certified content in your tenant, who can do it, but there should also be internal standards for what's certified. So Microsoft has great documentation on basics of, say, data modeling. I won't go into a technical deep dive here, but the key takeaway is that we both have seen instances in which there are data sets that are certified that followed all the rules, in which they meet all of the criteria, but then when you look at the data set itself, it doesn't meet all of the best practices from a technical perspective. So that's
Yeah,
very
it's got to
important
be
too.
performance, tuning,
Right.
optimization, naming conventions, nomenclature, all of that, documentation on calculations, all of that should go into the certification process because data sets, again, as the kind of the third takeaway here for today, data sets are critical when it comes to sharing and reusing, right? To avoid proliferation, you want to have correctly named, certified, and promoted data sets so that when people come in, they can find the finance, the sales, the HR or product, whatever data set that has the data they want, they can find it and it's already correct and they can use something. They don't have to go and recreate that data set every time. That's like the third big takeaway when it comes to that is, sharing and reusing and certifying of data sets.
Yeah, and one other important point in terms of, besides meeting that technical standard, is when you go through all of that and you have reports and content and dashboards that's certified and it follows all of that process, one thing you do hear often is, well, where is this data coming from? Especially if it's a more sophisticated report that's pulling from multiple different sources. If you're an admin within a workspace, and or even a member of a workspace, and you want to see where is the content coming from, there's a great feature called data lineage, which in this view shows you exactly how it all fits together.
Yeah, and this totally fits into that governance process because ideally you'll have, the precursor queries coming from your different sources. into a governed data set that has been certified and promoted and then shared. And then you have a bunch of report assets that are connecting to that and using it. Very, very important, because when you click on the data set, there's some really nice Lineage things that you can do there. For example, if you need to make an update to that data set, you can actually send a notification out to notify, hey, we've made changes to the sales or operations data set, change the calculation, etc. And you can use that notify to notify all those downstream members that that data set has been updated.
Yeah, a really handy tool. Okay, so let's go back here. Okay, so for managing lack of trust, that's everything that we covered there in terms of endorsement, management, lineage. Most everything that we've covered so far are a collection of the native tools of Power BI, data set endorsement, the search features, things like that. However, sometimes you'll get into these edge cases where you do need some more advanced tool sets. And so we're going to cover that here. If we get into, let's look at the usage metrics here, going back into this tenant. So this is technically a native feature. But if I go into the admin portal and then the usage metrics, you can see usage across your entire tenant. Granted, some of the visuals may be a little more easily consumed than others. But we'll touch on how you can retrieve some of this data on your own if you wanted to build some of your own data sets. But the takeaway here is you can look at it across the tenant level, or you can look at it, say, for just one individual report. So if we wanted to look at just one specific report and see who is using it, when are they using it, how often are they using it, all of this data is available and at your disposal.
Yeah, and again, really good process of that governance, process that you're going to go through is reviewing content that's already there. So this will help you identify, data sets that may be lightly used or heavily used. If you have a heavily used data set with a high volume of usage on a recurring basis that's not certified, you may start to go, well, hey, maybe we need to take a look at that because, multiple people across different departments or teams are using that data set and it needs to be reviewed. This could also tie into some of your premium capacity metrics where you look at, how long do data sets take to refresh, how often are they viewed, etc. And again, just that correlating between what content that you have, how it's being used, and how it's being governed can all play into that review process that you go through. And it doesn't have to be daily. You don't have to look at these every single day to see how your environment's doing, but coming back in and looking at them, maybe once a week, once a month, a couple times a quarter, very important to help that governance process.
Yeah, and what's interesting is there are instances I've seen where, and I'm sure Eric too, where we'll have engagements with clients who say, hey, we've got 2,000 reports or 2,500 different reports. What do we do about this? And so that's one of the best starting points, is just to figure out, are all 2,000 reports being used? Which ones are not being used? Which can we turn off? Which can we consolidate? Okay, so let me go into the audit logs briefly. So one thing you can look at here is, again, going back into the admin portal, we were just talking about the usage metrics. There's also audit logs. So I've already gone through and teed this up here. Essentially what we're looking at here is that, again, with the usage metrics, if you wanted to see at a very high level who is using one specific report or just across your entire tenant, you can do that. Audit logs also give you the capability to search for really any activity that may be taking place in your tenant. So I'm just looking at viewed Power BI report in this case. But if you want to see who printed a report, who created a report, who edited a report, modified a workspace or a data set, you can do all of that. So this gives you very, very, very granular level detail on what is happening in your Power BI tenant.
Yeah, and the audit log portal is really just a continuation or an implementation, querying those Power BI REST APIs. So you can also use all of that API functionality to go and do your own content, create your own queries. Even we'll show you here in a second, create your own Power BI report on the Power BI API to go get that data set and query it. And again, this is a very kind of advanced feature in terms of your governance process, but it gives you some very nice power in being able to go in and analyze what's going on. You can do a lot of stuff within the APIs besides just querying usage. You can do things like kick off, data set refreshes, build new reports, build new workspaces, all of that kind of fun stuff. But we're going to focus on how you can use that API for a governance.
Yeah, that's right. So you can use the API much like many other APIs to initiate and kick off events. So if you want to programmatically manage activity within your tenant, you can use the API to do that. Again, it's an advanced feature. But for the governance aspect, what we're showing here is activity events. You can also just really use it to pull down metadata. So let me show you an example of what that would look like. So this is essentially a Power BI report of Power BI reports. This is using the API, and what this is doing, it's very simple. It's just showing you a list of the content within the tenant. So you may recall earlier I was searching for the word actuarial. Now the key difference here is that with the native search features of within the Power BI service, it's only going to show you the content that you already have access to. But if you want to give visibility to the content, or at least the list of content that people don't have access to, you can pull something together like this with an API to show there is already all this content out there on this particular subject matter. And if they don't have access to it, when they click the URL, it'll just say you don't have access.
Yeah.
But it is a great
Power
way.
BI for fun stuff.
Yeah, it's a great way to really leverage the most advanced capabilities of the Power BI service to show users what is out there and what they can use. Okay, so that covers the advanced tools. We're coming up on time, so we have wanted to conclude with some key takeaways. So number one, governance requires oversight. So as you can see here, we covered a lot of different tools and techniques and different methodologies that you can employ across your Power BI service. But it's not something that you can just do once and then put on autopilot. It does require at least one admin or perhaps a small group of people to maintain that kind of oversight over your system.
Yeah, and a little bit now is a lot less later, right? So taking the time to do simple things like turning off workspace creation automatically, starting to look at the usage logs for seeing people come in and onboard, put a process in place to organize that. A little bit now will save you a lot of time later when it really is a hot mess that you are in way over your head and you have to do some serious cleanup to manage.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and the tools that we covered here are great ways to manage that cleanup. But ultimately, like with business intelligence in general, it's not just a one-time project. It's a process, and it's something that is continuous. And this is really where it comes full circle back into your data culture. If you employ these techniques and these methodologies correctly, really the end result is that you can drive a healthy data culture within your organization, because the end result will be having a platform that has content that's easy to find, people can access, they know how to use it, and they trust it. So this becomes a self-perpetuating data culture that will really benefit you and your organization. Okay, so that concludes our presentation. We want to say thank you for attending and listening. We hope you found it helpful. Eric, what are some of our Power BI Quick Start offerings here?
Yeah, these are just a couple offerings that we have Catapult to get people moving within Power BI. Again, they're just designed around proof of concepts to help you understand what are some of the key capabilities that you can do.
Yeah, and these are some great offerings that we have. So if you already have Power BI, or if you're completely new to it and haven't used it, if you just want to know how to get started, this is a great way to get off the ground.
And you want to take a survey, because every person that enters the survey gets a drawing for that $75 Amazon gift card. So not only do we want to hear, what we did well, what we did poorly, but you want to have a chance to win $75, which is always nice.
Okay, well, we did wrap up a few minutes early, so at this time we can go into the Q&A.
So I do see one just scrolling into that about regarding having a few Power BI different workspaces corresponding to dev, QA, and production. They were created before the Power BI service deployment pipeline was made available, how can you bring those pre-existing workspace into the service deployment pipeline capability without disrupting the workspace and the report data sets in them? That's a great question.
Yeah, I just saw the question, Eric. I'm still reading. Do you want to touch that one first?
Yeah, I mean, my first thought is if you're really concerned about making sure that those workspaces continue to be undisrupted, then you're probably going to only be able to do that using the API to move content across workspaces. Alternatively, what you might be able to do would be able to pivot ever so slightly and create a new workspace and then share the content across and publish that content in as an app in the new workspace to have some sort of migration process for your users. But ultimately, if you really want to leave it as it is and not have any end user disruption, I think the only way you're going to be able to do that is going to be through the API. Normally, I would say you'd have to almost, download the Power BI data set, save it, publish it to a new workspace, recreate it effectively. But again, that has an end user disruption.
So we've got another question in here. What strategies are effective at driving Power BI adoption? So I can touch on this one. So this is an interesting one. The shortest answer, I think, is besides everything that we covered in terms of making sure that you have content that's easy to find and trustworthy and people know where it's coming from, key or good visual design obviously is key, because if it could be the most well-governed content throughout your entire organization, but if it's surfaced in such a way that the visuals and the navigation are difficult and people don't know how to use it, they won't. So good visual design is the first part. The second part I would say is that when designing dashboards, there's this tendency to more often than not show data really at an aggregated level. So to put a line chart, a bar chart, a column chart, a pie chart, and then perhaps having a secondary page with all of the details. What I have found to be useful is if you can surface it all of that in one page. And what I mean by that is that if you can show the specific details of the content on the page and organize it in such a way that the users can validate it themselves. So for like a sales dashboard, if you're saying this sales representative had $5 million worth of sales in this quarter, you click on the bar and then it shows you the list of all of those opportunities. That's a great way to foster trust in the data rather than someone just having to see a summary and just take your word for it. If you can show them that high level view and then also surface that detailed data so they can see the individual records, that's a really great way for people to validate the content themselves and then really build trust.
Yeah, I think we had one other question there around government cloud and the auditing feature. When is that going to be enabled? And unfortunately, I don't have an answer to that one. The closest I've seen has been around the community boards requesting access to that, and that would be my encouragement there. If that's a feature that at your organization you would find useful, and you're a bit frustrated that it's not there because it's not in the Gov Cloud yet, I would go to powerbi.com, go to their community, and add it to the ask and get people to sign up for that. I mean, Microsoft continually reviews those feature requests, and that's how they prioritize a lot of the work that they're doing. I don't have a link for that, but I would. That's the first place that I would go to check for would be to find that link.
Okay.
Well, I think that which wraps it up, Seth.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, the only other thing I was going to touch on with regard to you can also ask government. Okay. Yeah, the only thing I was going to say was with the vote link. I'm glad Nancy mentioned that. There's a Power BI ideas portal. So for any particular features that you want to really request directly from Microsoft, or if there's features that are pending, you can go into the ideas portal and really vote for them yourself. Microsoft releases updates to the Power BI platform every month. And most of those features are really driven by the user community. So as you continue to drive adoption with Power BI in your tenant, perfect. Thank you. Thanks for putting the link in there. I've done that myself personally. I'll submit ideas, I'll vote on ideas. So it's a great way to ensure that the Power BI content that you have is continually improving and meeting those kinds of market demands.
And get everybody to go click on it.
Yeah. All right. Are there any other questions? Pipeline.
Yeah, Seth, you want to put that API into the API URL?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, let me do that. Let's see. Okay. Here is the link for, yeah, the API. So that's just the overview page. But as I mentioned, you can, what I was showing, we were showing really two specific things. One was the activity events. So this is the content you can retrieve that would ordinarily be retrievable from the audit logs. And then the content search that I had put together was really doing this, getting data sets, getting the reports. This is how you would pull together that kind of metadata list of content throughout your tenant.
Well, again, thank you everybody for joining, and hopefully you found this particular track beneficial. And we just, stay tuned for the next technical track coming up here in about 15 minutes.
Yep. All right. Thank you, everybody.